Tonight, the plan to strengthen Canada's steel industry, reeling from Trump's trade war.
We have to change the way we do things.
Mark Carney makes a tariff announcement of his own, but it's not aimed south of the border. Plus, we break down what a trade deal with Washington could cost Canada.
We have all the cards. We have all the cards.
How did someone allegedly hijack a plane and fly it to one of Canada's busiest airports?
This has never happened before.
New details on the accused and the American fighter jets scrambled to respond. Far from home, wildfire evacuees get a small taste of home.
You are what you eat, right? The food is life.
Inside the huge efforts to care for thousands forced to flee.
Knowing that they're safe, at least back here, it's emotional. It hits you in the feels.
From CBC News, this is The National with Juanita Taylor.
Thank you for joining us. Adrian is away. The Prime Minister is promising new measures for the Canadian steel industry as it reels from Donald Trump's trade war. Canada is taking aim at China and other foreign exporters accused of flooding Canada with cheap steel. The new rules will put tighter limits and potentially higher tariffs on steel imports, making Canadian steel more competitive. But the industry has already lost jobs to Trump's tariffs, and there's no word of progress on a deal with Washington. Ashley Burke starts our coverage tonight.
A day after the Prime Minister acknowledged a deal with Donald Trump would likely include tariffs, he visited the heart of Canada's steel industry to help a sector hit hard.
We have to change the way we do things so we can better support our companies and our workers during this time of change.
Facing mounting calls for help, Mark Carney vowed to protect Canadian steel producers struggling with 50% U.S. tariffs.
The combination of all these measures will ensure that Canadian steel producers have a bigger share of the Canadian market.
His plan doing more to crack down on a problem made worse by Trump's trade war. The amount of cheap steel foreign countries like China are selling into Canada by tightening the limits on how much steel Canada imports before certain tariffs kick in. The government's also investing $70 million to help steel workers and $1 billion for steel companies' projects.
There's a lot of good things that were announced today, but we can't lose sight of our primary focus.
What David Fritz says he really wants is all tariffs lifted. He says his steel fabrication company in Saskatchewan needs W-shaped beams from the U.S. that it can't get in Canada, even though they're the most commonly used type to build structures and bridges.
It's easy to say, just go find alternate sources for your steel supply. But we have long-term relationships. We need to get to an agreement with the U.S. so that we can continue trading freely and fairly.
Trump says the deals he's striking with countries include tariffs.
We have a number of them coming up, but overall, we're doing well and we're taking in a lot of money.
But Carney suggested the level of tariffs Canada would accept is still up for negotiation.
We'll see what the final agreement is, if there is an agreement.
The Conservatives' trade critic called Carney's announcement a step in the right direction, but said a deal that includes tariffs is not an option.
Ashley, Trump said more deals are coming, but I'm not hearing indications that Canada is close to one.
Yeah, Carney called the negotiations long and tough. He said they're working constructively on a deal, but was clear there isn't one on the table yet, with Trump's deadline 2 weeks away.
Ashley Burke reporting in Ottawa. For a bit more on the economics of this, let's bring in senior business reporter Nisha Patel. So Nisha, how much does the industry need this kind of support?
Well, when Donald Trump hiked steel tariffs to 50%, Canadian producers say they were basically shut out of the U.S. market. The industry has seen a 30% drop in production in May, hundreds of job losses, and warned worse could be coming. So companies say they needed support urgently. But even before the trade war started, steelmakers had been calling for this crackdown, accusing countries like China of flooding Canada with steel at artificially low prices.
Right now, foreign steel supplies 2/3 of all the steel sold in Canada. That is not the recipe for a strong, stable, secure, strategic supply chain.
So the measures that Ottawa announced will raise the cost of imported steel, which could boost demand for domestic steel. Now, it may not make up for all of the business that Canadian companies have lost to the U.S., but it could go a long way.
So, Nisha, the steel industry sees this as a positive move, but there are trade-offs.
Yeah, some companies are really concerned that this will raise the cost of steel products. They say with most steel mills located in Ontario and Quebec, it's really expensive to put rebar on a train and ship it right across the country, which is why builders in BC don't source their steel domestically. It's actually cheaper for them to get it from the U.S. or overseas. They are looking for an exemption from Ottawa. They say without it, building projects like new condos are going to get more expensive, costs that will ultimately be passed on to consumers.
Thank you, Nisha.
You're welcome.
Some Indigenous leaders are warning tonight that Canada could see disruptive protests if they're not properly consulted on big new national projects. Olivia Stefanovich sets up tomorrow's meeting between First Nations chiefs and the Prime Minister.
Take care of all the chiefs.
First Nations leaders preparing for a high-stakes meeting with the Prime Minister at a critical point in relations.
You can't talk about big projects and trying to fix this country without fixing the basic infrastructure for First Nations children in this country.
After months of backlash and concerns over new legislation that fast-tracks big energy and infrastructure projects, First Nations chiefs are invited to a summit with Mark Carney, but they're not all sure the government will listen.
This isn't consultation. They're coming in, they're putting up the agenda.
If the government doesn't want to work with us, I think it will be another Idle No More.
In 2012, the Idle No More movement saw mass protests against federal legislation, seen as a threat to Indigenous rights and environmental protections.
We must work together.
Now, 9 Ontario First Nations are going to court to block new federal and provincial laws.
When the water's gone and when everything's poisoned, what are we going to have?
Our consent must be earned, not assumed.
Carney says that is the intention.
Even if there is a project or when there is projects identified, consultations around the conditions around those projects that must be fulfilled for them to be built.
Some First Nations leaders welcome big projects.
I think it could change our lives drastically.
They see partnerships instead of conflict.
Literally the very first time in Canadian history is the government saying, we won't develop resources on your land unless you're a co-owner. Well, my gosh, like generations of Indian chiefs have been asking for that and elders have been praying for that.
The summit will be a major test for Carney to prove he can work with First Nations, with more than 600 chiefs invited. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
New details are emerging about an alleged hijacking that grounded flights at one of Canada's busiest airports. As Jessica Chung tells us, we're learning more about the man now charged and the emergency response behind the scenes.
RCMP surround a Cessna on the tarmac at Vancouver International Airport. The 39-year-old man arrested is now charged with a terrorism offense, hijacking the aircraft.
In 80 years, this has never happened before, so we're all a little bit surprised, would be a mild way of putting it.
Across the water at the Victoria Flying Club, shock that it all involved one of their planes. The owner of the club says the accused was not a member there, but this was where he came in, posing as a potential passenger before the incident.
How did this person get into the cockpit of a Cessna 172 airplane?
This expert says it's clear the pilot was experienced.
He knew where Vancouver Airport was, and he was circling it at an altitude that was, enough to make the air traffic controllers very nervous. So, this was an individual who knows what airspace looks like and knows how to fly an airplane.
The incident grounded flights at YVR, diverting passengers to airports hundreds of kilometers away from their destination. At the same time, we now know American F-15 fighter jets were scrambled to respond, but NORAD says the Cessna landed safely before it could be intercepted. There are strict protocols about who can fly a plane. A pilot needs a valid operating license and a flight plan. But this expert says safety protocols should be reviewed in light of this incident.
We've got to make sure that the protocols we have at these flight schools might have to get changed in terms of, looking at making sure that there's a heightened level of awareness and security being exercised at these flight schools.
The accused appeared in court Wednesday and was charged. He was ordered to remain in custody for an assessment. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Vancouver.
A little girl's pink blanket is being forensically tested as Nova Scotia RCMP continue the search for a brother and sister missing since early May.
The blanket was located and seized very early in the investigation. It was outside and found near Lily and Jack's home.
RCMP said they are reviewing around 5,000 video files from the surrounding area sent in by the public. Also new today, detachments in Ontario and New Brunswick are helping investigate the disappearance of 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack. Alberta's Premier is holding a series of town halls across the province. The aim is to hear directly from residents about a number of contentious issues. And as Aaron Collins explains, it's a format many Albertans are used to and support.
This is something of a summertime tradition in Alberta. This panel on a road trip of sorts, crisscrossing the province, taking the political temperature of Albertans. The Premier firmly at the wheel.
The conversations that we have tonight and throughout the Alberta Next engagement process will help to shape the future of our province.
Go ahead, sir. Billed as a way for Albertans to help map out a new place for their province in Canada.
I think the Alberta Pension Plan, personally, is the biggest leverage tool we have in any kind of negotiations with Ottawa.
And a chance to vent a bit along the way.
I think if we just stopped sending Ottawa money, we would have so much in this province.
Past Conservative premiers have gone down this road before. In 2004,
his report is an honest reflection of what he heard.
And again in 2020.
Ottawa must meet us halfway. They must stop taking us for granted.
Still, this town hall is packed. This journey, one these Albertans seem willing to take again.
People are frustrated. They're frustrated with the state of the relationship with Ottawa. They're frustrated with decades-long grievances that they haven't felt they've been able to air.
Alberta independence is the elephant in this room.
Do you support Alberta exiting Canadian Confederation and becoming a sovereign nation?
Well, the Premier insists this panel isn't about separation, but some say it is about giving separatists in her party a chance to be heard.
Danille Smith is walking this tightrope. She's trying to keep people who want to separate inside her party fold.
This political roadshow will hit the brakes in late September, but the rubber will really hit the road next year. That's when the Premier says some of the ideas floated there will be voted on in a provincial referendum. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
The UN Security Council is expected to meet tomorrow on the latest escalation of violence in Syria, including Israeli airstrikes in Damascus that killed at least 3 people.
إسرائيل كاتس إن الجيش سيواصل مهاجمة قوات.
Journalists took cover as one blast and then another rocked the Syrian Defense Ministry behind them. Israel says it's attacking the Syrian military to stop its advance into Suwaida province in the south and to protect the Druze minority there. Monitoring groups say days of clashes between Druze, Bedouin, and now government forces in Suwaida have killed hundreds and led to human rights abuses.
And it led to an unfortunate situation and a misunderstanding, it looks like, between the Israeli side and the Syrian side.
The Trump administration said it got the parties to agree to take steps to end the conflict, and Syrian troops were seen leaving Suwaida by evening. In Gaza, a dangerous rush for food turned deadly. At least 20 people were killed at one of the aid sites backed by Israel and the U.S. Sasha Petrovic shows the tragedy connected to a much criticized system.
Frantic Palestinians carrying friends and relatives arrive at the Nasser hospital in southern Gaza. Doctors declare at least 20 people dead. Trampled at a chaotic aid distribution site run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF. Palestinians are dying for a kilo of flour, he says. I spent 30 minutes squished against the gates, he says. I passed out. GHF is an organization made up of armed private contractors backed by Israel and the U.S. It's the only outside group Israel allows to distribute aid in Gaza after kicking out the UN.
Make no mistake, this tragic incident was no accident. This was a calculated provocation, part of a pattern of targeted efforts by Hamas and its allies.
As its proof, GHF released a photo of a man it says is believed to be with Hamas, and a picture of a kind of pistol it says is known to be used by Hamas. Hamas denies involvement. But hunger has brought a whole new level of desperation to Gaza, and NGOs like Oxfam, which used to deliver aid alongside the UN, say GHF's model is mostly to blame.
Distribution, the militarized distribution system that is in place today is a very poorly managed and planned system. It is designed to hurt. It is designed to lack dignity.
The UN calls the system inherently unsafe. It says at least 875 Palestinians seeking food have been killed in the last 6 weeks, the majority near GHF sites. GHF says Wednesday's deaths are the only ones it's aware of. Sasha Petrusek, CBC News, Jerusalem.
A fire has severely damaged the main stage at the Tomorrowland Electronic Music Festival in Belgium, just 2 days before it was set to begin. That's the sound of fireworks exploding as the fire burned. Organizers say no one was injured. The festival attracts over 200,000 people over 2 weekends and is known for its stage designs and light shows. More than 100 wildfires are still burning in Manitoba tonight, threatening homes and lives in northern communities.
It was a very, very scary, very traumatic scenario.
The latest on the complicated evacuation efforts and the massive volunteer operation next. Plus, what we may have to give up for a trade deal with the U.S.
We'll continue to conduct these complex negotiations in the best interests of Canadians.
Breaking down what a deal could cost Canada. And later, an accidental discovery among the crops.
So he called me over and I had a look and I was like, whoa.
Ancient history unearthed on an Ontario farm. We're back in 2. Changing wind conditions have kept a large wildfire away from 2 communities in eastern Newfoundland. But residents of Jamestown and Winterbrook on the Bonavista Peninsula have been told to be ready to evacuate. The Chance Harbour fire now covers 1,200 hectares and continues to burn out of control, though it hasn't grown in size since yesterday. The fire has destroyed a number of cabins in the area. Manitoba remains under a state of emergency tonight. More than 100 wildfires are burning across the province, and some 12,000 people have been forced from their communities. Karen Pauls shows us the efforts to bring them to safety and a touch of home.
Fresh moose meat, part of a traditional meal for First Nations elders forced from their homes by wildfires.
You are what you eat, right? The food is life.
Ever since the first mass evacuation last month, these volunteers have been serving hundreds of elders every day.
When you're in the city so long and you're craving the wild food and home-cooked meals, so maybe give them a little bit of that taste of home.
Roughly 12,000 Manitobans are out of their homes due to wildfires. 1 in 10 are living in group shelters set up in indoor soccer complexes and hockey rinks. Many from Garden Hill and Shinanu Nation. In 4 days, the Canadian military airlifted nearly 1,600 people out. Now, back on base in Winnipeg, technicians are inspecting this Hercules aircraft to make sure it's safe to fly. It got a little too close to the flames during an evacuation flight. Lieutenant Colonel Craig Greeley was in charge of both of Manitoba's missions. He says they're challenging, but also rewarding.
We had a meeting with the chief and the deputy chief from Garden Hill, and just hearing the strain, the sadness in their voice as they think about potentially losing everything up there, but knowing that they're safe, it's emotional. As my chief would say, it hits you in the feels.
This food delivery is also hitting the spot for these elders. They've been living in this Winnipeg hotel since the end of May.
We like their food, MKO, when they come and feed us, wild food.
In the air and on the ground, an army of people working behind the scenes to provide safety, a sense of home, some comfort, at a time when all of that seems in very short supply. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Canadian Eugenie Bouchard is set to retire after competing in next week's National Bank Open in her hometown of Montreal. In a social media post, she says, "You'll know when it's time. For me, it's now," ending where it all started, Montreal. Bouchard's breakout year was in 2014 when she made it to the Wimbledon final, the first Canadian in the Open era to reach a Grand Slam singles final. There are pleas tonight for Ottawa to reverse course and give refuge to an Afghan aid worker detained by immigration officials in the U.S.
Mohammed is one of those people who needs our protection.
Why advocates say his life is on the line. Plus, as the tariff deadline approaches, what Canada might need to give up to get a deal done.
Anybody that thinks that, oh, this will just pass over and we'll go back to, quote, normal, unquote, hasn't been paying attention.
We'll break down the state of negotiations. And a former Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner opens up about how the commission changed her life and the country.
What I really want is for Canada to see that this is a still unfolding story.
My interview with Marie Wilson. The National breaks down the stories shaping our world next. This video of lava spurting from a volcano was captured by a drone in Iceland, 15 kilometers from Reykjavik. The fissure is about 1 kilometer in length, and it's the latest of a dozen eruptions since the area became active again in 2021. The family of an Afghan man stuck in an ICE detention center in the U.S. is speaking out. He wants to join them here in Canada to seek refuge from the Taliban. As Ithil Musa tells us, U.S. authorities have agreed to his release. It's Canada that's denying his entry.
Shafiqa Jalali and her family's escape from Afghanistan and Taliban rule was not easy. They didn't travel together, but somehow they all got to Canada and found refuge. Except for Jalali's youngest son, Mohammed Younisi. He is not doing well, says Jalali. He says he's gotten old and it's been almost a year that he's been there. There is here, this ICE detention facility just north of Houston, Texas. Younisi was arrested after being separated from his family in Arizona by ICE agents last September, and he's been at this immigration detention facility ever since. Younisi and his family paid human smugglers thousands of dollars to guide them through 10 countries and the Darien Gap, one of the most treacherous migration pathways in the world, to get to the U.S. and eventually Canada, where they have family ties.
A U.S. judge has granted Younisi permission to travel to Canada to claim asylum. But his lawyer's petition for a temporary resident permit to allow that to happen was rejected by the federal government in June.
It is absolutely not an overstatement to say that it is a matter of life and death. He is currently facing removal to Afghanistan.
According to a signed affidavit submitted to U.S. officials, 27-year-old Younisi fled Afghanistan after being kidnapped, beaten, and forced to work long hours in a field, all because he worked for an organization that helped women. Now there's a very real possibility he will be sent back, putting his life in danger, says this refugee settlement worker.
Mohammed is one of those people who needs our protection. And with everything happening in the U.S., this is a time to say who we are and to do the right thing.
Canada's immigration ministry says it cannot comment on Eugenie's case due to privacy legislation. Shafiqa Jalali is grateful her family has found safety in Canada, but it's hard to celebrate, she says, when her son's life hangs in the balance. Idil Musta, CBC News, Toronto.
Now it's time to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world. Former Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner Marie Wilson reflects on the personal toll and public value of the inquiry that produced 94 calls to action.
I believe strongly that this was a turning point in Canadian history.
But first, Canada locked in tense U.S. trade talks as a Washington-imposed deadline looms.
We'll continue to conduct these complex negotiations in the best interests of Canadians.
With key Canadian industries already strained and inflation ticking up, what's the best deal Ottawa can get? Jonathan Gatehouse breaks down how an agreement could redefine Canada-U.S. relations and what it might cost this country.
The US and the UK has signed a tariff deal.
President Trump slapping a 20% tariff on all Vietnamese imports. India-US trade talks, and the Trump administration is putting them on notice.
Donald Trump's desire for tariffs may only be surpassed by his love of a deal.
Tariffs go into effect August 1st, but the president is setting the rates and the deals right now.
And Canada's need for a stable arrangement with its largest trading partner.
I have a tariff concept. Mark has a different concept, which is something that some people like. But we're going to see if we can get to the bottom of it.
Mark Carney and Trump set a tight 30-day deadline at the G7 summit last month, already extended to August 1st under new threats of a 35% tariff from the U.S. president and old complaints about the flow of fentanyl and supply management for dairy products. Still, talks continue behind closed doors, and both sides remain hopeful. So what's on the table? Trump has gripes about autos and barriers to U.S. banks, but the actual U.S. government list of irritants is relatively short, including things like Canada's zero plastic waste goals and rules for cheese, all of which may simply mask Trump's larger and far more radical aim to unravel global free trade, says U.S. trade lawyer Dan Yutzel.
Anybody that thinks that, oh, this will just pass over and we'll go back to quote normal unquote hasn't been paying attention for the last decade. You know, managed trade is the order of the day. What we did from the mid 1990s until 2017 is over. It's over, it's gone.
We're going to stop all negotiations with Canada right now until they straighten out their act.
It's part of a bigger negotiation. It's something that we expected in the broader sense that would be part of a final deal. We're making progress towards a final deal. There's more to be done, to be clear.
Carney has already climbed down on one sticking point, Canada's digital services tax, shrugging off Trump's provocations, all while dangling a sweetener: Canadian participation in the U.S. president's proposed Golden Dome missile shield.
This is a very exciting project. This is something that will, the general said close to 100% protection, so that's something we need.
A low-key strategy that may well pay off, says Canada-U.S. specialist Fen Hampson.
I think the Canadian goal here is to give Trump a win so he can say to the Americans, look, we've got the Canadians to contribute to the development of the Golden Dome. They're upping their game on defense.
Trade agreements aren't usually forged in a crucible.
It's a very long and tedious process.
It took John Weeks and his Canadian team 14 months to negotiate the original NAFTA deal.
I mean, there's some times when it can get quite tough, when people sort of lose their tempers. It requires a lot of patience as well as continued focus on what's important.
We're going to run 90 deals in 90 days.
The Trump administration has an audacious overall goal, although they've already missed their initial deadline, and the end products are likely to be skinny memos of understanding rather than comprehensive treaties.
We will not negotiate in public.
The Canadian and American approaches stand in sharp contrast.
We have all the cards. We have all the cards.
Does Canada have any cards to play here?
A lot of Americans make their living by selling goods to Canadians and services to Canadians. And so I think we have a lot of cards.
Trade barriers have already been erected around U.S. markets, with the tariff rate currently running at almost 20%, the highest level since the early 1930s. And Trump is under pressure to prove the turmoil has a purpose.
I mean, I think for businesses, uncertainty is kryptonite.
Jake Colvin advocates for cross-border trade in the U.S. He says there is enthusiasm for Trump's vision of reshoring manufacturing, just not at any price.
When every problem with our trading partners is seen as a nail and tariffs are seen as a hammer, it's hard to get that certainty for the trading relationships that the businesses need.
The stakes are no lesser for Mark Carney, who won election by casting himself as the best person to take on Trump and protect Canada, including in upcoming Canada-US-Mexico trade negotiations.
President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen.
I think what Carney needs to deliver are two things. One is to lay the table for CUSMA renegotiation next year, and to ensure that we're not negotiating under the barrel of a gun.
Have you spoken to the president today? All while trying to make sure he doesn't get undercut by other nations.
You want your tariffs to be lower than your competitors. Live to negotiate for another day. That's the best we can hope for.
There will be rewards if a deal gets done, but also risks, including political blowback. Anti-American sentiment in Canada is high. In a recent poll, 59% of Canadians named the U.S. as the biggest threat facing the country, a tripling since 2019.
To have those discussions,
And even a successful agreement might end up changing the way Canada works.
If you have a new security and economic framework between Canada and the U.S., I think it'll be very Western Canada oriented, in the sense that it'll be driven by energy and critical minerals. Where does that leave manufacturing in Ontario?
No matter how friendly or even tempered is the beast, if I can call it that.
There will also be questions about future dealings with the United States. Pierre Trudeau famously compared the relationship between Canada and the U.S. to sleeping with an elephant. I wonder if that still holds.
Well, this isn't the elephant rolling over in its sleep. This is the elephant actually trying to figure out how to get us. So it's not just an elephant, it's more like a tiger.
A changing analogy based on old fears and Trump's new law of the jungle.
As Jonathan mentioned, Ottawa doesn't expect Washington to drop all tariffs as part of any new trade agreement. On Wednesday, Carney indicated that a deal on softwood lumber is one of his top priorities. Coming up, more than 10 years after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report, a former commissioner reflects on the work and what lies ahead.
Whatever else happens, this moment has transformed that relationship.
My interview with Marie Wilson is next. More than a decade after the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, former Commissioner Marie Wilson talks about what's happened since.
We are all still playing roles within this story, and that we need to keep challenging ourselves.
I spoke with her last year about how her personal ties to residential school survivors helped shape her and the role she played.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you becoming a Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner. I thought that you and the others had been appointed to these roles, so I was surprised to learn that there was a huge selection committee.
It's funny, people say, well, how did you get to be a commissioner? I said, well, I applied for the job, you know. This part of the country in the north, where the highest per capita number of residential school survivors of anywhere in the country live, I know something about that multi-generational impact I tried really hard to bring my personal experience on a very personal level forward as a valuable asset. And what I mean by that is we had gone through struggles in our personal family, and we had turned that around. I firmly believed that if that is possible within a family, surely it's possible within a country. And in the end, what can I say? I was the lucky one who got chosen. It just felt like such an honor, but it also felt so important. And I really wanted to do it well, and I wanted us to get it right, and I wanted us to do something that could never be forgotten or dismissed.
Why write this book now?
I believe strongly that this was a turning point in Canadian history.
I really was alone, lonely, scared.
I thought sharing what I know, sharing what I have experienced, sharing the first-hand account of what happened in all those rooms as we went about our work, that is a valuable contribution to set down and to offer up and eventually to leave behind when I can't tell that story firsthand. Almost without exception, when survivors spoke to us, the thing that they focused on as being the most devastating, and I was fully prepared for that to be a story about sexual abuse. It actually wasn't. It was the moment of rupture from home, the moment of separation from family, from mother in most cases, from parent, and from the bond of where I belong.
How did you, as one of the 3 commissioners who had to sit and listen at all those hearings and at all those national events, how did you keep it together?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, one of the things I learned, and I learned it in a crisis moment where I did start to lose it. You know, I could feel myself kind of going underwater, as it were. I was going to start crying outwardly. I caught myself, and I realized that the trigger for me was that I was projecting to my own children and to my own grandchildren, and asking myself the question that Canadians need to ask themselves and have been asking themselves, which is, what if this had happened to my child? What if this had been my kids they took away and I didn't get to raise? The response of the survivor who was speaking to me is that they immediately stopped talking. And I thought, I cannot be the one who prevents that person from sharing fully what they came here to say today. So I've got to get my act together. And I kind of flipped a switch and did that and carried on from there. And that day taught me an important lesson that I must not let myself slide there.
You talk about bringing, unique perspectives into the commission as one of 3 commissioners. You are married to a residential school survivor. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's a particular thing to live with some of the aftermath of the schools that comes into homes, whether it's inability to express emotions or whether it's challenges communicating because you weren't allowed to express yourself or to talk about anything. You were constantly shushed. In my case, it was through my husband, but also through our extended family, because there are many residential school survivors in our family.
Can you share with us just how you balanced being a TRC commissioner and also the wife of a residential school survivor?
It's kind of stereotypical, but gee, honey, I had a hell of a day at the office, You can't come home with that, because my day was all about things that could be triggering to my husband. I really relied on the health supports that were available because I couldn't take that home.
You were there with him when he shared his story at a TRC hearing, and that was very touching to learn that. Mm-hmm. Do you want to share a little bit about that experience?
We live here in Yellowknife, and we were holding hearings here in Yellowknife.
Good evening.
This was the natural place for Stephen to be able to share his experience as a survivor, and I think it would have been a disservice to him if the fact of my being a commissioner had made it impossible for him to ever get to make a statement to the TRC. My co-commissioner, Chief Littlechild, was here with me. And so we talked about it will all be in the scheduling. I got up from the table and walked around. Stephen came up and I sat beside him and he gave his statement. And that's how it was. It was a very sacred time.
Was there ever a time during the TRC that you just wanted to quit? Did you ever think that you couldn't follow through what your
I never once
responsibilities were?
thought of quitting. There were days, for sure, when I thought, what if this doesn't make any difference? Is anyone actually taking this to heart besides ourselves? Or are people just going through the obligations of a court-ordered duty that you must hold a Truth and Reconciliation Commission? But I remember something in a hearing that was so beautiful and it was so transformative. A particular survivor expressing enormous regret. They were raised in these institutions, in violence, with a lot of aggression and some various forms of abuse, and how they wished that their children knew that they actually loved them, and they'd never been able to tell them that. And then this young woman who's at the back of the room, for a parent who's speaking to us who doesn't know that child is there, coming forward and sitting down beside their parent, and an opportunity for those two, parent and child, to say, I love you, I love you. And you think, okay, whatever else happens, this moment has transformed that relationship.
Since the TRC completed its mandate, what has been the positive results from that?
Some people are doing big and significant curriculum changes, just to use that example, and yet just the other day I had a couple of teachers from here in the north come up to me and say, thank you so much for this book. We are expected to teach now about residential schools and about treaties and so on, and yet we ourselves do not know enough about all of that. So there's still a lot of work to be done. The Canadian Medical Association has done some extraordinarily powerful work, both in filmmaking and the work that I know is underway right now towards apology and correction for systemic issues within the healthcare system. There are business associations that are trying to work more in partnerships. What I really want is for Canada to see that this is a still unfolding story, and for Canadians to see that this is our collective story and that we are all still playing roles within this story, and that we need to keep challenging ourselves to play the most positive roles we can.
Since our interview, Marie Wilson's book, North of Nowhere, became a national bestseller. The University of Montreal is translating it into French, and it's set to be released next year. Coming up, an Ontario family unearths a piece of ancient history.
People held this thousands of years ago, and then you were the next person to hold it in your hand.
How they accidentally discovered a 10,000-year-old spearhead on their farm. That's going to be in our moment. Well, you're looking at an ancient spearhead, a historical tool that was used by hunter-gatherers in North America over 10,000 years ago. Laura Valenga and her husband stumbled upon the ancient artifact on their family farm in Paris, Ontario a couple of days ago, and tonight their historical discovery is our moment.
I was trying to grow like some giant pumpkins, and I got my husband to go along with me. He was just kind of standing in the field, and he saw just a little bit of what he thought was plastic. He picked it up and then he banged it against our ATV, and he realized it was a big deal. He called me over and I had a look, and I was like, whoa. And right beside it was the second piece. We have 2/3 of what they call a Gainey type paleo point. And you don't see this type of stone around here. You can tell that was chiseled by a person. An old friend of mine, he has his bachelor's in archaeology. He said that's the oldest type of point that you can find in the area, because before that, the glaciers were here. Anywhere from 10,000 to 13,000 years ago. I was shocked. People held this thousands of years ago, and then you were the next person to hold it in your hand. It's cool holding it and imagining what it would have been like, what the world was like when this was made and when somebody cherished it and carried it around and used it.
Well, an expert said the stone used to make that spearhead was originally from the area that is now Ohio and must have been carried over to Ontario by a hunter-gatherer all those years ago. Now, Laura's family has been told they can keep it, but she's going to donate it to a university so it can get studied. Well, from all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anytime, anywhere on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Juanita Taylor. Take care.